And one of the things that you were asked about these phone records, I think the prosecutor asked you, well, the phone records won't show you WhatsApp communications, right?
That's correct.
Asked whether or not the phone records would show you, or said that they would not show you FaceTime communications, right?
Correct.
And so I think your answer, tell me if this is what you said, was that you can't say that there was not any communication between Mr. Williams's phone and, for example, Mr. Copeland's phone on that night. You can't say that because it could have been maybe WhatsApp or FaceTime, right?
Yeah, some sort of platform that for which we just don't have logs.
All right, I'm going to deny the motion for mistrial. It's not as if the state couldn't have gotten the testimony in an appropriate way anyway. It's not like the testimony itself is that big of a deal.
Judge Whitaker,
But I am
take
going
it easy.
I'm going to exclude that statement and just tell the jury to disregard the statement and any testimony that had anything to do with the statement. So let's get Mr. Sprinkle back. Did you want to put anything on the record, or are you just getting ready for the jury?
She got all upset for nothing.
For the record, for the court.
All right.
Your Honor, this is from United States versus Roberts, Roberts. It's 640F 2nd 255. It's the Ninth Circuit, 1981. It's been cited many times. It specifically says that continued prosecutorial misconduct may show a course of conduct establishing the intent to provoke a mistrial and bring into play double jeopardy considerations. You have not been here the whole time, and we thank you for being here.
Oh, Brian's saying the same thing I mentioned.
Opening statement. Mm-hmm. And I know you got my motion.
I know, and I know what your argument is.
She's not even going to let him get his
is
point
that-
out.
And I understand what that law says as well. Ms. Love does not appear to be trying to get a mistrial so that she can try this case over again, which I know if that were what she was doing, she wouldn't be able to try the case over again anyway. So that's just not applicable here. Now, is there continued prosecutorial misconduct merits a mistrial anyway based on that? Yes, potentially we get to that point at some point. But there is not, from what the court's vantage point is, an indication that the state is trying to goad anybody into moving for a mistrial so that they can retry the case because they think they're losing the case. I think they think they're winning the case.
No way. There's no way they think. For real? There's no way the prosecution thinks they're winning this case. And I mean, I guess I have to ask y'all to find out. Thank you to everybody who voted in the poll so far. Y'all really think the prosecution believes they're winning this case with Lil Woody, Monk Tunk, Quindarius Zachary, Mr. Sprinkle? Like, that's your team? Yeah, there's no way we're retrying this case. This is make it or break it. Jeez.
But I will say this. This is not becoming, in the state of Georgia, of a trial. And it is all the time, Your Honor. It is all the time. At some point, it's got to end. Because this is not fair to Mr. Williams, and I assume the other people on trial will agree. It is this constant hiding balls, citing law that does not stand.
Said hiding balls.
For, not giving over information, not.
What are you talking about, Brian?
Arguing with the court. And I think that it does rise to a level now, but I understand the rule. But I think that we're well beyond it. And the reason I said the closing statement is it's literally.
Oh, I saw that. I know.
So what you gonna do about it, Judge Whitaker? If you saw it,
I think
come on, man.
Frustration was apparent a few minutes ago. But I truly am struggling with whether all of this is purposeful or this is just really poor lawyering on the part of members of the state's team.
And what did I tell y'all? Unless Ms. Hilton jumped across the desk and choked Lil Woody out, I mean, maybe then we'd have like a 2% chance of a mistrial, but knowing them, they'd probably just, put Miss Hilton in front of a TV and let her watch a video on how not to choke out a witness. I don't know. Like this. Judge Whitaker has made it clear over and over again. She's going to proceed with this trial, let the jury decide what's going to happen here and move on with her career. Because she's on center stage now. The whole world is watching this. Y'all see on the day we don't even have court, there are 1,400 people in here watching. The world's watching this. And Judge Whitaker, she's trying not to fumble it. I wish she would have held strong and just called it a mistrial at the beginning. But, I mean, you made your bed, Judge Whitaker. You got to lie in it now. Or get Love out of here. Choice is up to you.
Either way, it's really unfortunate. If it's something other than poor lawyering, then it is more than unfortunate. But at this point, and we're going to just move on with that exhibit being excluded. I don't know if I can stress any more than I already have how much the state's lawyers need to make an effort to be upfront and forthright in the trial of this case. So let's get the witness back in.
This is an interesting point. I want to stop right here. Shout out to Nicole for saying this. Whitaker has already fumbled. She is under investigation as well now. What? It's interesting though. Think about this. I don't know if that's true, and I'm gonna have to do some research into that. If y'all have any more information on what Judge Whitaker has going on, let me know in the chat. Think about how bad this would look though. Brian Steele, aka Jeffrey Williams, right, filed multiple motions to get Love and Hilton removed. Now Miss Love has a complaint with the state bar saying that she has all of this prosecutorial misconduct. If something happens, how is this going to look that the defense was saying, hey, Judge Whitaker, even before we got to this point, we've been trying to get Adriane Love off of this case. We've been trying to get Miss Hilton off this case. And now you see Adriane Love, she's gone, or she's having issues. We told you, we warned you. We said all of this was going to happen and had been happening before you got here. You didn't believe us. Now she's in here getting mad and frustrated with Miss Love live in 4K. Like, come on. Judge Whitaker herself was warned over and over. There were motions filed, legal documents we looked at and reviewed on this channel and on this show that said, these are all the things they've been doing, Judge Whitaker. And if you think they're going to stop, it's not the case. And then we have this. Why are you surprised?
Your
she
Honor,
had plenty of time and information.
To renew my motion for mistrial, or consider that my motion is renewed before the asking of the next question,
Yes,
please.
it's renewed.
Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, Judge Whitaker could grant the motion right now. And this would be over. Ask yourself this, and I want y'all to answer me in the chat, and then I'll keep it going. Ask yourself this. Judge Whitaker, with the stroke of a pen right now, could grant a mistrial. Out of the 40, what are we up to? 46, 47 motions for mistrial. She could end it today. It's Friday. It's not a holiday today, right? She's still got 6 or 7 hours that she could just make this go away. And she's choosing not to. Why? Ask yourself why. Now it's 46 now. It's 46 motions for mistrial. I think it might be 47, but it's definitely 46. .46 motions for mistrial is crazy.
Thank you.
Frank
Ladies
said,
and
why do I
gentlemen,
think she
upon
hasn't?
further discussion, that last exhibit, which is State's Exhibit 528Y, is excluded from evidence, and so that means that y'all need to disregard it entirely in your thoughts and in your deliberation in this case, and as well, you need to disregard any testimony that might have been given about that particular exhibit. All right, go ahead, Ms. Love.
Thank you, Judge. DDA Sprinkle, you were asked on cross-examination about whether you attempted to determine whether Kenneth Copeland, in the words of Mr. Adams, lied when talking to the police. Do you recall that question?
Yes, generally, he asked me something about whether I endeavored to detect that or figure it out.
Did you make any steps to determine or to corroborate the information you gained from Kenneth
Right.
Copeland?
I did.
Would you tell the jury what steps you took to corroborate information that you gained from Kenneth Copeland?
Well, there was a number of things that I did. I, in particular, looked at all the cell phone records. Like, for example, so I looked at the call detail records, the times that people were called or made calls, the parties to those calls, and also the towers that the handset or handsets utilized by those calls. And as I've testified previously, you can tell somebody's general location based on the tower and the sector of the tower, the antenna of the tower that their handset utilizes to facilitate the call. And also, you can, in knowing who somebody is communicating with at a given time, that can tell you a little something as well. And so when I compared Mr. Copeland's statements to my analysis of the cell phone records, I tried to the best of my ability to corroborate as much of his statement as I could by analyzing all of that.
You were also asked on cross-examination the power went out over here. Just keep on all of the screens.
On what? I can't see any of the screens, so.
They're black.
The monitors themselves are out?
Uh-oh.
Okay, well, do we need them right now? Do we need them right now?
No, not at this.
It
precise
depends on
moment,
what
no.
the judge decides.
In terms of, is this one on? No. No? Okay. Do we have our backup thing? It does sound like something went silent too, so.
Yeah, if there's a mistrial, that doesn't necessarily mean they all would go free.
Just to be clear, Your Honor, it's not the monitors that have lost power, it's whatever's feeding the monitors.
Okay. Well, we got the sound fixed, and so now we're going to have issues with the video, the site.
It's always something.
But you can just monitor back up.
Yes, thank you, Judge. DDA Sprinkle, did you utilize statements from other witnesses to corroborate information you obtained from Kenneth Copeland's interview?
I did.
Citation clause.
Not just from that, so overruled.
You were asked on cross-examination whether you obtained a wiretap for Defendant Williams' phone. Do you remember that?
Yes.
All right. As it relates to the Donovan Thomas murder, would it be something you would expect to be able to get a wiretap for a year and a half later?
I'm going to object on the ground of speculation.
Overruled.
As it relates to the Donovan Thomas murder?
So wiretaps are for evidence of things that are going to be talked about in the future. I'm trying to think. I don't believe I've ever obtained a wiretap to investigate a crime that happened in the past, solely to investigate a crime that happened in the past. That's not to say you couldn't. I have heard of such things, but I've not personally done it, and I did not do it in this case.
You were also asked on cross-examination about the photographs that depicted, or the social media postings that depicted defendant Stillwell. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And did you testify that you obtained information about the photograph from a person you spoke to?
Yes. So apart from what was just available in the public internet form, that being the website from which I obtained them, yes, I did. I spoke with someone about the photograph.
Okay. Mr. Adams asked you about Detective Thorpe consulting with Detective Gaither and Detective Dennis. Do you recall that?
I do.
Do you have any knowledge of whether Detective Gaither or Detective Dennis were consulted with before warrants were taken out by Detective Thorpe? In other words, did he seek their permission to take out the warrants?
No.
You have any knowledge about that?
No, I don't believe he did, no.
Okay. You were also asked on cross-examination by Mr. Adams about the dismissals and the NPGJ for certain people that warrants were initially taken out for the murder of Donovan Thomas. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. Were the dismissals of those warrants in any way based on the additional investigation that you did with your investigator, David White, into the murder of Donovan Thomas?
Well, no, not the one with Sledge. That was the Mr. Antonio Sledge. That was the preliminary hearing judge that threw that one out. So,
What's the objection, Max?
Hang on.
It's not responsive testimony about other court proceedings.
All right, I don't know if your mic's on at all, but
I'm
It's
sorry,
not.
it was non-responsive, and it was testimony about other court proceedings, which I believe is inappropriate and hearsay.
overruled.
Did your investigation into the murder of Donovan Thomas lead you to present MPGJs for people who had been arrested for his murder?
well, yes, for the people for which we didn't, the people that we didn't prosecute for the murder, yes.
Okay. Mr. Adams asked you specifically about corroborating the information you gained from Kenneth Copeland's interview.
It's true, Greg.
And specifically, he asked you about phone calls with Demiki
Yeah, give
and
me
Garlington. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Are you able to tell the jury what information Kenneth Copeland provided you that you were able to corroborate?
Well,
Okay, I think your mic's still out, but sustained.
You were asked on cross-examination by Mr. Shart whether Kenneth Copeland said he was at the Green Store at the time of the murder. Do you recall that?
I do.
When you are looking at cellular location information for cell phones, do you look at a static point in time to determine what a person's handset is doing? In other words, do you only look at the time of the incident in question, or is the time leading up to it and the time after it also relevant?
Well, yes, the times before, during, and after the homicide can absolutely be relevant.
Was there any point during your investigation where Kenneth Copeland said, I was at the Green Store at the time of Donovan Thomas's murder?
I don't remember that. I don't have every single thing that he said during his, particularly the 9-hour statement, committed to memory, but I don't recall him saying that, being even cognizant as to saying that he knew exactly where he was at the time that Donovan Thomas suffered his fatal gunshot wound.
Okay. As it relates to what Kenneth Copeland did tell you about his whereabouts on the day of Donovan Thomas's murder, were you able to get information as it relates to any significant others in Kenneth Copeland's life about where he was on the day of the murder?
Well, so to be clear, I never spoke with Kenneth Copeland, but from the statements that he provided, yes, I believe so. I definitely, because he would reference people that he knew, I sought to identify, for example, phone numbers for those people, because again, that would go to my corroborating his statement based on, among other things, his phone logs.
Okay. When you
Yeah, they need to
testified
know.
on
What was that last
cross-examination
question?
that you were looking at big things for inconsistencies, what did you mean by that?
What is?
Well,
Hold on, I gotta run that back. What did she ask him?
I never spoke with Kenneth Copeland.
To
Here
get
we go.
information as it relates to,
Hold on a second. What did she say?
tell you about his whereabouts on the day of Donovan Thomas's murder.
And I've got this sped up too, y'all.
Were you able to get information as it relates to any significant others in Kenneth Copeland's life about where he was on the day of the murder?
Well, so to be clear, I never spoke with Kenneth Copeland, but from the statements that he provided, yes, I believe so. I definitely, because he would reference people that he knew, I sought to identify, for example, phone numbers for those people, because again, that would go to my corroborating.
I should have just left it alone. Dang. Shout out to Elizabeth Wright for the 5 gifted
based on, among other
memberships.
things, his phone logs.
Okay. When you testified on cross-examination,
Hold on.
that you were looking at big things for inconsistencies, what did you mean by that?
Well, a big inconsistency would be, as I cited, if somebody were to say, for example, I witnessed a murder and there's a video of the vantage point that the person cited that they stood, and then I look at the video and there's nobody there, that would be a big inconsistency that I would seek to clear up, and indeed I did that here. That's what I meant by that, something that's glaring, something that you're not able to, something for which there's not a reasonable explanation that can clear this up for you.
You were also asked on cross-examination about who was in possession of the Infiniti that was at the Texaco prior to the Donovan Thomas murder. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And he said
Why
Yak
did
wasn't
you
in there.
say, do you mean, or if you mean actual possession? Do you recall responding
Yes.
regarding actual possession? Why did you say that?
Well, the person that was actually like at the helm of the vehicle.
At the helm? Come on, Mr. Sprinkle. This isn't a ship, brother.
And had actual control of the vehicle, not the person that had some sort of legal right to the vehicle through a lease agreement or otherwise.
Did you see anyone else's name on the rental records for the vehicle, the Infiniti that was at the gas station up the street from where Donovan Thomas was gunned down?
That's a
No,
bad.
I don't think so. Just Mr. Williams.
That doesn't have anything to do with it. So because he rented the car, that means he's somewhat implicated. You can rent a car and let somebody else drive it. Now, it might be against the terms of the rental agreement, but just because you rented the car, that doesn't mean he's the one who did anything. Crazy, man. Crazy, terrible question. Fatima, you got it. We gonna make it. We gonna make it through.
Mr. Adams also asked you about phone calls between Demise McMullen, Kenneth Copeland, and Demikion Garlington.
I'm sorry, y'all. Bear with me 1 second. Let me do it this way.
In your review of Kenneth Copeland's interviews, do you recall him ever giving a specific time that he was in the car, as in 1 a.m., 4 a.m., a specific time that he was in the car with Demise McMullen and Demikion Garlington?
Well, it was afterward, but no, I don't recall the specific time.
After
or
what?
If he cited a specific time. From what I remember, he would cite. Generally, he'd say, I think it was around 10:30 or something. That's not a quote at all, what I just said. But no, I don't recall him having like a regimented timeline, like at 1927 hours, we went to this location or anything like that.
Okay.
Excuse me.
You were also asked about the absence of okay. You were also asked about the absence of phone calls in the phone records that you obtained as it related to Defendant Williams and Demekion Garlington. Do you remember that?
I do.
We're going to get to Mr. Adams' cross-examination here shortly, too. If I can get this video to load. Lord have mercy.
Are you able to tell the jury whether the phone records or the call detail records that you obtained
do they have a recross after this? No. No recross after this. I might have to do this another way.
and Demekion Garlington? Do you remember that?
I do.
Are you able to tell the jury whether the phone records or the call detail records that you obtained would reflect FaceTime calls?
No.
Would those call detail records reflect WhatsApp calls?
No.
Do you know, or can you even say that there was no communication between Defendant Williams and Demekion Garlington?
No, I can't say that. The records, like I said, the call detail records are only those that were logged by the cellular phone company. A FaceTime call would be facilitated through Apple, the Apple Corporation's platform.
Really, I did not know that.
Did
y'all know that FaceTime call? I know they mentioned it before, but the reason people use FaceTime is because they're not documented on your phone records.
ever charge Defendant Williams with Donovan Thomas's murder?
No.
Interesting.
You were asked about the headliner in the Infinity, or obtaining gunshot residue from the Infinity that you found a year and a half later in a different state. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did you have any information about the number of people who had been in the Infinity between the time that Donovan Thomas was gunned down and the time it was located in a different state?
No. And from what I recall, Hertz wouldn't have been able to provide me with records of that anyway. It's very interesting. I couldn't ask for the rental history on a specific vehicle. I could only ask for the rental history of a specific person.
Interesting.
And did you have any information about the number of times the interior of that vehicle had been cleaned, laundered, or anything else in that year and change?
No. Not that I recall. No.
Without that information, why then did you seek to obtain a search warrant?
Well, I primarily wanted to obtain the data from the vehicles, the Infinity's infotainment system, you know, the system that you might hook your phone up to. I thought that if we were able to get a search warrant, we might as well also analyze the interior for gunshot residue. I mean, I was aware of what the probative value of that may or may not be, but I thought better to have it and not need it than the other way around. So that was the rationale there as to why I did that, or was contemplating that. That ultimately never happened.
Mr. Adams also asked you about not getting cell site data for the phone number that you determined belonged to Demekion Garlington, or at least that you testified on cross was Demekion Garlington's phone number.
Well, I don't know that I definitively figured out that that was Demekion Garlington's number, no.
And
Miss
what
Love's like
information
5'9", 5'10", something like that.
could you get without having
heels,
probable
she's
cause to
over 6
obtain
feet.
cell site location data?
You can obtain the subscriber information. That is the information that the phone company has on file for the person that pays for the line, if they have that information on file. You know, the person that they would bill on a monthly basis, basically. And also the what are called call detail records. These are just, I mean, these are anybody who's had phone service, you know, and they've seen a bill and it has a list of your phone calls. Well, that's essentially what this is. It looks a little bit different when you get them pursuant to a legal process like this, but it's just a list of the incoming and outgoing calls and text messages, not iMessages, incidentally, not messages sent between iPhones, but text messages, SMS messages. And that's essentially it. Notably absent from records, call detail records, if you don't have a search warrant, in other words, there wasn't a finding of probable cause, is that tower location data that I've testified to. That is the general area where the handset was, the equipment to which the handset connected to facilitate the communication. Without a search warrant, you cannot get that. You can only get the dates and times of the calls and the numbers that were that were part of that call.
And talking about the lack of calls in those records between Defendant Williams and Demekion Garlington, if two persons or two handsets are next to one another, do you generally expect to find phone calls between those two people if they're sitting, for instance, in the same vehicle?
Well, it's not impossible to call somebody sitting in the same vehicle as you. So I don't know why somebody would call somebody that's sitting there. Maybe they can't find their phone. I call my phone, I can't find it. I mean, there could be any number of reasons. I can't speculate as to why you'd call somebody in your immediate spatial proximity.
Makes sense.
Who was it that gave you the information about the photograph where Shannon Stillwell is depicted?
Quindarius Zachary.
And who was it that gave you the date, or the approximate time or date that the photograph was taken?
Quindarius Zachary.
And finally, you were asked about the length of time people remained in jail after being arrested for Donovan Thomas's murder. Do you recall that?
No, I don't recall specifically being asked about the length of time they spent in jail, but I recall being asked about something along those lines, similar to that maybe.
Okay. If a person is held on something other than the warrant for murder, would an MPGJ or a dismissal of the murder charges automatically allow them to be released?
No.
All right, just 1 second.
Sure.
Get it together,
That's
Ms.
all I
Law.
have at this time.
All right, is there any recross? All right.
Mr. Sprinkle, picking up where the prosecutor left off in regards to that NPGJ, what we do know, though, is that Mr. Copeland's NPGJ, the charges or the document that dismissed the murder charge that first put him in jail in 2015, that NPGJ wasn't done until 2017. Is that correct?
That sounds right. I didn't file that, but, and I don't recall who the prosecutor was that did, but I was aware of it. But I don't know that he was ever actually booked into the Fulton County Jail on the murder charge, though.
You don't know that?
I think he was in the federal jail, if I remember correctly.
The other three were, though, right?
Well, not Mr. Sledge, Mr. Garlington, because like I said, Mr. Sledge's case was dismissed in January 2016. Mr. Garlington, Mr. Jackson, aka Mr. Stillwell, yes.
Well, let me ask you this. You said Mr. Sledge's charges were dismissed in 2016. Where was he before his charges were dismissed?
Fulton County Jail.
Right, so in jail on that murder warrant, right?
Correct.
Okay, so he was in fact imprisoned on Thorpe's murder warrant until until his charges were dismissed, right?
Well, in the jail, not prison, but yes, he was incarcerated, yes.
Okay, I mean, jail, prison, you're not on the streets, your freedom's taken from you, right?
Right, I mean, it's a distinction without a difference. I'm just saying that, prison and jail are two different. Yes, his freedom was restricted. He was not allowed to leave. He was in a government facility.
You were asked a number of questions about cell phones. And I wanted to kind of pick up there. Now, you were aware from the work that you had done on the case, as well as listening to Mr. Copeland's statements, his interviews, that he had multiple cell phones in January of 2015. You're aware of that, right?
Mr. Copeland did?
Mr. Copeland, yes.
I'm sorry, I have one number for him. I don't recall him saying that he personally had multiple cell phones.
He did say it.
I don't remember that now.
How about this? Do you remember in an interview that he had with
He
the
said it
detectives,
in a couple of interviews.
where
Yep.
On January the 11th of 2015, at about 3:30 in the morning, where he talks to the detectives about his cell phone or cell phones. Do you remember that?
No, I don't recall that. I know I'm familiar with that interview, but I just don't remember him talking about multiple cell phones or anything like that.
Okay. Are you aware that
He did. He said everybody's
there
got
were
two
no
phones.
calls? And if we're just going to just talk about the number that you're familiar with in regards to Mr. Copeland, let's focus on that one. All
Okay.
right? Are you aware that there are no calls from Mr. Copeland's, per his cell phone records, on January 10th, 2015, between 6:58 p.m. and 7:26 p.m.? Are you aware of that?
I don't have the full records in front of me. I do see that the records that I examined, the last relevant call is at 6:58 p.m.
Okay. And you had, when you got his phone records, we've talked before about the fact that you've got the cell tower data, so you had some idea of where you thought he was at particular times based on those records, right?
I take that back, actually. At 7:01, 7:23, 7:24, 7:26, 7:28, 7:43, 7:45, 7:49, 7:51, and 7:54, there were calls,
Calls
transactions.
coming in or going out?
Let's see, there was an inbound call at 7:01, there was another inbound call at 7:23, there was an outbound call at 7:24, there was an inbound call at 7:26, an inbound call at 7:28,
So what
an
does that mean?
outbound call at 7:43, an outbound call at 7:45, an inbound call at 7:49, an inbound call at 7:51, and that's it.
Okay. And so having his records, knowing the cell tower data, you were able to opine on where he was at a particular time on that night, January 10th, 2015, right?
Well, his general where the
These
part
are
of
Lil
town
Woody's phone
basically that
records
his
he's talking
handset
about.
was located.
You placed him, according to your report, either at or near the McDonald's on the evening of January 10, 2015. You remember that?
I do.
All right. Now, you don't have any cell phone or cell tower data records on Mr. Copeland that shows his phone going to what we've called the Sky House on that night, do you?
I don't recall that.
So no.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
Nothing in your records that refreshes your recollection that you've got any of that. You don't have any of that to show that he went to the Sky House or his phone, the phone that you're saying is his, went to the Sky House on that night. True?
That is correct. I don't believe that. Yeah, just taking a look at my notes, doesn't appear to me that I found that his phone traveled to the Sky House.
And one of the things that you were asked about these phone records, I think the prosecutor asked you, well, the phone records won't show you WhatsApp communications, right?
That's correct.
Asked whether or not the phone records would show you, or said that they would not show you FaceTime communications, right?
Correct.
And so I think your answer, tell me if this is what you said, was that you can't say that there was not any communication between Mr. Williams's phone and, for example, Mr. Copeland's phone on that night. You can't say that because it could have been maybe WhatsApp or FaceTime, right?
Yeah, some sort of platform for which we just don't have logs.
Right. And so what we have ultimately is that
They should be able to get them, though.
Evidence, none, right? Because we can't assume a negative.
Mm-hmm.
There is no evidence that there was any communication between those phones on that night, right?
I'm gonna clip that and use that as a sound effect. This is one of the best statements of the year. Listen to what Mr. Adams says here.
There is no.
We just don't have logs.
Right. And so what we have ultimately is that there is no evidence, none.
That's it right there. That is the sound. That is the voice clip from this entire trial. So what we have here is there is no evidence. I'm clipping that.
Copeland's phone on that night. You can't say that because it could have been maybe WhatsApp or FaceTime, right?
Yeah, some sort of platform for which we just don't have logs.
Right. And so what we have ultimately is that there is no evidence, none, right? Because we can't assume a negative. Mm-hmm. There is no evidence that there was any communication between those phones on that night, right?
Correct.
Prosecutor asked you, said,
CG
you
said
never
make that a sound
charged
effect on the
Mr.
stream day.
Williams
Yeah, you already
with
know.
Donovan Thomas's murder, right?
I'm gonna add it
you
today.
did not.
That's correct.
Because you had no evidence that he committed that murder, true?
Well, yes, but I also can't charge people with crimes. I'm not a police officer and I'm not a grand jury. But I think I understood what the question
Dang.
was intended to elicit. And yes, that's correct. I didn't think that there was evidence to charge him.
Yikes.
You, I had a question about a video. I'm not sure if it was a prosecutor that asked
That's
you, or
crazy.
whether maybe it was Mr. Short who asked you about a video.
Yeah, I think
specifically at the
Sprinkle's a great
McDonald's.
witness. I agree.
You didn't get any video from the McDonald's, right?
I did not.
Okay. Are you familiar with different recording systems where there's something recorded and it's kept for a certain period of time and then either recorded over or deleted? You familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. I think we talked about that you talked about that a little while ago, right?
Yeah, basically that there's only a finite amount of recording space, so eventually the recording has to start over again.
Now, when we're talking about that, the recording starting over, you said before that some recording systems record for a certain period of time and then maybe a day, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, something like that. You remember that testimony?
Yeah, depending on the size of the recording, the size in megabytes of the recording media. I mean, presumably they don't have them on tape anymore. Yeah, it would depend on that.
Right. So if you've got and not hypothetically, but just based on your knowledge and your experience, right? A system that records every 2 weeks. It's not that you've got 2 weeks of recordings, then all of a sudden that goes away and it starts over, right? Isn't it just that you have one day and then a particular day is taken up by the following day as it starts and goes all the way through? Do you understand what I'm asking you?
Yeah, I think I understand. It's a hard drive that the data is being written to. So, I mean, I don't know that as the drive fills up, you're right. I guess what you're asking is that after 2 weeks, does all the data just immediately go away at the 2 week mark? No, I wouldn't think so. No, I would think it would be an incremental deletion.
As it relates to this, if there's not knowledge, I would object based on speculation as to any particular.
Sustained.
Okay.
Johnny says, if the jacket doesn't match,
All right.
you must retract.
Mr. Sprinkle, you were asked, I think following up on a question I'd asked you, then the state asked whether or not you were aware of if Detective Thorpe consulted with Detective Dennis or Gaither. Remember that question?
Yes.
And we had talked earlier when I questioned you originally on Cross about the fact that you knew that there were interviews, for example, with Mr. Copeland, where all of those detectives were present, right?
Yes.
And those would have been things that took place after January 10th of 2015, correct?
Yes.
As the murder investigation was being conducted, right?
Correct.
Okay. Then we have the arrest of these 4 individuals on October 20th of 2015, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I don't know that they were all arrested on that day, but that was the date the warrants were obtained.
Got you. That's the date that Detective Thorpe made a decision, and I'm gonna arrest these 4 guys or get a warrant for their arrest, right?
That's right.
Okay. Which he was wrong about, right?
Well,
Sustained.
Okay. You were asked whether or not you thought that,
Who
or you
objected?
knew whether
Sounded like
Detective
Max.
Thorpe sought permission from either Detective Dennis and or Gaither to swear out the warrants for the arrest of the individuals in the Donovan Thomas case,
yes.
right? I think your response was either you don't know or you don't think he did.
Well, no, I don't think he did. That'd be very odd. The permission lays with the magistrate judge or a judge, not with his coworkers at the Atlanta Police Department. But to my knowledge, no, that never happened.
But what you do know, from speaking to the detectives, and by the time you grab a hold of the case, right, is that certainly Detective Gaither and Detective Dennis had been involved to some extent in the murder investigation, right, or at least assisted with it, right?
Yes.
And after Thorpe swore out the warrants in October, they were aware that these 4 people were sitting in jail, right?
They were.
Neither of them, these 2 seasoned investigators, either came to Thorpe or you and said, hey, you know what, we got some problems here. I think we got Detective Thorpe didn't do what he was supposed to do. We need to take another look. That never happened, did it?
Objection, relevance, and vague and compound.
What?
Sustained.
Come on, man.
Okay. In regards to the Infinity, we talked initially, I questioned you, not talked, about possession of the Infinity. And you used the word actual possession.
Right.
Right? You said, no, I do not know who was in actual possession of the Infinity on January 8th, 9th, 10th.
Meaning he didn't know who was driving it.
And you were just asked a question about the importance of actual possession. And actual possession is something that's important to you,
Yeah.
or was important to you in making a determination about the Infinity, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, Adams is a
Mr.
beast.
Williams' name appears as the person who the car was rented to, right?
Yes.
Right. Now, in terms of your investigation, if you believe that there was something that was done or crime committed using the Infinity, right, that is why it would be important to determine who was in actual possession of the Infiniti at the time that the crime was committed, right?
That's correct.
Because I can rent a car and it be in my name, but if someone else has possession of the car and is committing the crime, they're the person that's committing that crime, right?
That's
You would-
correct. I
you
mean,
would
unless
think.
they're able to show that somehow the people that actually possessed the car did so with the encouragement of the lessee. But yes, you're right.
And specifically in regards to this case, this Infiniti, Mr. Williams, you had no such evidence. True?
That's correct.
Yikes. Dang, Mr. Sprinkle. Oh, man. Shooting the APD in the foot right
Your
now.
investigation,
Good Lord. And the state, really.
I use the term investigation, your work on the case led you to recognize that there were inconsistencies and you couldn't trust what Kenneth Copeland was saying or what he had said in his statements. True?
Dang.
Well, no, I thought that his statement, there were a number of things that I thought were accurate about his statement.
And some things were inaccurate, right? As far as you knew.
You would have to, his statement was there was a lot in his statement. I tried to look at his statement generally based on what he was able to remember when he provided that 9-hour statement and primarily compare it with the phone records. And when I did that, I didn't see any glaring, I can't recall seeing anything that was just wholly inconsistent or impossible. Like, for example, the first witness, Spencer Wright, what he said happened was impossible. He wasn't there. I didn't see anything like that with Kenneth Copeland.
Did your investigation on this
Except
case,
there
by
was
the
no
time
evidence.
you picked it up or got involved in it late 2015,
Yeah.
2016, seeing everything that had been done or not done thus far, also lead you to believe that you couldn't necessarily trust the investigative work of Thorpe, Gaither, and Dennis?
Well, no. I mean, yes, there was a mistake.
He's starting to stutter again.
Mistake and not taking a look at the video.
Come on, man.
And checking to see if the witness was actually where he said he was. Okay, but would that mean that I wouldn't be able to trust anything in the entire investigation? No, I wouldn't make that sort of blanket condemnation such that I would just disregard everything in the entire file and every finding of fact made by the police. No. I mean, I can see that a mistake was made in one part of the investigation, but there are other parts of the investigation that were not as erroneous.
His mistake put people in jail, though, didn't it?
Yes.
That's all.
All right, any other defense attorney have redirect? I mean, I'm sorry, not redirect, recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Okay. All right, Mr. Sprinkle, thank you for your time. I think it sounds like we might see you again at another stage in this case, but you are free to go for now.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And it's a little after 4. Do we have another witness who's going to take hour and a half? If not, we'll just get started with somebody and go as far as we can.
We'll get started with Detective. Yes.
All right. Anybody need a break before we get to the next witness? Y'all good? Okay.
Your Honor, and as it relates to this particular witness, there has been a ruling as it relates to filming.